What's going on, everybody? Today we are doing our Let's Code AIS type. Now, if you may or may not have this assignment, but this assignment is going to cover vectors, structures, passing structures into functions, passing vectors into functions, and we're going to see how we can handle all those cases. So before we start, we're actually going to want to talk about what is a vector. So if you don't know what a vector is, it's a data structure that's really similar to an array. So when we look at an array, we know that there are blocks, and these blocks are usually in memory and they're side by side with one another, right? And we can store things, like let's say this is an integer array. We're probably going to want to store integers in this array, right? And arrays we know are fixed, and we have to declare the size of what how long the array is going to be, how many, things we can store in this array. Well, vectors are very similar to arrays, but the only difference is that they are dynamic, so we can add and take away items from a vector. When we're declaring vectors, we say vector. Well, first off, we actually want to include the vector library. The vector library is a library that helps us use a lot of different functions for vectors that I'm going to get into in just a moment. But to declare a vector, you want to do vector, and then in these little angled brackets, we want to say the data type. So that could be an integer, or I don't know, like a string or a structure, whatever. But for now, we're just going to do integer, right? And then we can, after that is the name. So we can call it my vector. I'm going to do my v for short. Actually, I'll just call it my vector so you guys don't get confused. My vector. And there we have it. We just declared a vector of type integer, or a vector where we can store integers in. And with this, the length of this vector right now is 0. So in an array, we would do like int my array, and then we would probably, decide how many items we want to store in this array. So we know that the beginning of this array is going to have five elements, but the vector doesn't have any elements right now because we didn't declare a size. We can declare a size, but we don't have to. So if we want to add elements to our vector, we can do, there's three functions that you guys are going to have to use in your assignment. So one of them would be myVector.size. What myVector.size returns is the size of the vector. It's pretty straightforward, right? Size of vector. And this period right here is called the member access operator. And what that means is we have this variable, this thing, this object, and we use a period to access the members of this object. A vector has a function in it, and one of those functions is size, which returns the size of the vector. If you guys want more information on different functions that vectors have, you guys are more than welcome to look on, Geeks for Geeks or any like website that has C++ in it, right? So size is going to return the size of the vector. The next function that's going to be really useful for us is going to be myVector.push_back. And inside these parentheses, we have to put a parameter. So what the pushback, in order to understand what parameter we're going to put in the parentheses, we need to know what the pushback function does. And all that does is add integers, or not integers, but adds elements to your vector. So if we have an int vector, we need to push back an int. So let's say like 7 for this case. And then let's actually push back my vector dot pushback_back. Let's push back 4. And what this does is that here the vector size is going to be 1. Here the vector size is going to be 2. And if I were to do my vector dot pop back, I believe, yeah, but I think it's pop back. Let me check. Pop back vectors. Let's double check because we want to make sure. Yeah, so it's pop back. So what that does is pop back, is that it's going to take the last element of the vector and essentially delete it from the vector. Pushback adds elements to the end of the vector. Popback deletes elements at the end of the vector. So if we were to go into this case right here, the vector would just have one square and it'd be the size, it'd be 7 and the size is 1. And it's still going to be at index 0 because there's a similar structure to array, right? And then here on this line, we're actually going to have, oops. Let's see this. On this line, we're going to have two squares, and the first one's going to be 7 and the second one's going to be 4 at index 0 and 1. And the size of this vector is going to be 2. But then when we do pop back, we're only going to have one square, it's going to be 7, and the size is going to be 1. So those are important functions that you guys are going to have to use for your AIS type assignment. And then the next thing that you guys are going to have to know is what a structure is. So what a structure is this cool way of kind of declaring a new type, such as like an integer or string, but it's going to be a structure, and that structure is going to have different data types in it. The structure lets us use multiple variables. So like let's say we have this struct called a person. We want to talk about characteristics of a person. So a person might have a name, so we can declare a string inside our struct, string name, and then we can also declare an integer inside our struct for the age, for example. So this person structure, this person data type is going to have, you can access a string that's going to store a name, and you can access an integer that's going to store an age. So if I were to declare this like in like my code or main, for example, I would want to declare like the name of the data type, which is person, because that's the structure. Uh, and then we'll do my person, or well, let's do current person, because that's the current person we're talking about. Current person, so there's this person structure, and the name of that variable is called current person. So if I were to do something like current person dot name, I could set that equal to my name, which is Luis, right? Luis. And then if I were to do current person dot age, I could set that equal to my age, which is 20. And this is kind of how you use structures, right? We can use a member access operator to access members of our structure variable, and these are called members, right? Age, name, they're members of the person because the person is the whole structure and the members are within the structure. So let's say we were going to, and you're going to need that for your assignment, right? Because in your assignment, we're actually going to have a vector of, okay, wait, hold up. We're going to do a structure first, because what we're going to do is I'm going to show you guys how we can store these structures into a vector. So name, Luis, oh, no. String, name, hold up, integer age, and then close this. And then right under here, we're going to have a vector and a structure is a data type so that we can put the name of the structure inside this vector, right? And this vector is going to hold people. So we can call this list or people list. So if we were going to add an element into this vector, we would want to create a single variable of a person. So the way we did that is current person, you know how we did that earlier, person is equal current person, right? And then current person dot name We can set that equal to Luis because we're accessing a member in the person variable, which is, or the current person variable, which is of type person. And we can do the same thing for the age. Age, wait, person dot age is equal to 20. And then all we have to do to add this to our vector is use that pushback function that I showed you guys earlier. So people underscore list dot push underscore back current person. And what that is gonna do is it's gonna create, a block, and that block in memory we're allocating a lot of space. We're allocating a lot of space in memory for to hold all the variables or all the members of our structure. So it would be like, technically they'd be like side by side or right next to each other, and then this would hold the name. Oh shoot, this would hold the name Luis, and this would hold the age, and this would be on 0 index because it's for one specific person. And then if we keep pushing back, if we keep pushing back with this technique that we're using right now, we could add more people to our vector and continue on like that. But instead, in your assignment, we're actually going to be pushing back AIS types. Now, oh, wait, hold up. Let me log in real quick. So we're actually going to get into the assignment and kind of see how we can read the data file and handle, parsing the file the way that your assignment wants to do it. But I set it up with this person structure so we can continue on from the example, so we don't really get too confused. In your assignment, we're gonna have this kind of, oops, let's fix this. We're gonna have this CSV file that we're gonna want to parse, and it's gonna have different kinds of information. So it might have a vessel name, it might have like an MMSI type, like a bunch of random numbers. But the PDF should tell you what exactly is going to be on, what exactly each piece of data is going to be or represent. In our case, we have a people CSV file, and we're going to have a first name, a last name, an age, and a hair color. And in our case, we're being delimited by semicolons. You guys, I believe your CSV file is delimited by commas. So what we can do now is actually go into the main. It's set up pretty much the same way you guys have it set up. And the first thing that you're going to want to do is go into your main and start reading line by line what information you have. So you're going to have a count of number of records. You're going to have a vector, which is going to be your database that we're going to create. iFile, you're going to have like some strings and integers that are going to be for formatting. And then the first thing that's going to happen is that it's going to ask you to open the input file. So you guys should already, and you don't have to do this in a loop. If you refer to your PDF assignment and you look at the cases that they give you, if the input's incorrect, then it's just going to terminate the program. As you can see, they do a return 0 here. So if this function returns false, it's going to give you an error and exit the program. If it's true, it'll prompt the user that the file was opened correctly and go into the read file. So for opening the input file, all we really have to do is prompt the user, enter a file name, and then if the file is open, we return true. If not, we're just going to return false, right? And then let's actually make sure you're testing your code along the way. So what we're actually going to want to do right now is to compile this and make sure that that works, that logic works. So it says warning, no return statements. So when I was setting this up right here, this function returns a boolean. So when you're setting things up, well, I believe it's already set up for you guys, so it should be okay. But if you see warnings like these, all you have to do is read the error right here. It tells you what line it's on. So line 95, that's where we're at right now. No return statement in the function returning a non-void. What that means is a non-void, that means it has a return type, and it says no return statement, so we have to return something, right? So that should fix that, and now we can compile this one more time. Oh wait, we have to save it. Always save your files, right? So cool. It compiles, no problems. Enter input file name. If I do like, I don't know, Q, error, opening file, exiting. So we know that works, and then if we enter input file name, so my file's name .people.csv, files open correctly, and we know that works. So we can move into our next step, which is actually reading the file, right? So let's go into the read file, and when we're reading the file, your assignment wants us to use a couple of helper functions. The helper functions that we're going to use are getNextField and SaveField, and I'll show you guys why we're going to do that in a minute. So to start off this function, the way you kind of want to approach it is you want to think about what you have to do. And what we're going to want to do is read this file, right? And if for a moment we're trying to think about how we would do it ourselves, like manually by hand, like if we were reading a file, we would look at the first line, identify what this first piece of information is, and that's a first name, right? So I would probably want to write down the first name, then I would skip this semicolon, or yeah, semicolon, and then read the next piece of information, which is a last name, so I'd write that down, and so on, and kind of repeat that process until the very end. And then once I get to the end, I just go to the next line and repeat it over and over again, right? So that's kind of the same idea of what we're going to want to do here. So when we're reading the file, the first thing we want to do is we're going to want to do a couple of things, because how I talked about we're storing how I would first read the first name, then store it, then read the second name, then store it, then read the third name and store it. We're going to be storing it into our structure because we have something that's going to hold this information for us, right? First name, last name, age, hair color. So we're going to want to create some sort of variable that's going to store it for us. So let's see, we're going to call that person and then current person, which is going to store the current person's information. Oh wait, that's save field. Oops. And then the next step I said is that we're probably going to want to read line by line, right? So we're going to need to use a string to grab the whole line for us. So what that's going to do is a string, I don't know, data line. And then that's going to grab the whole line for us. And the next thing we're going to want to do is figure out how we can parse this. So for a moment, I'm just going to refer to your PDF and kind of read you guys the algorithm out loud. So the algorithm for the read file, what we're going to want to do is use a get line to read in the line into a string. This string is going to be that whole data line that I just talked about. We're going to check for end of file, which you guys should already know how to do that. Set index to 0 and field number to 0. So what this is essentially trying to say is that the field number helps us identify two things. So the field number helps us identify which number we're going to be, or which piece of data we're going to be storing into our structure, and the index tells us where we are in our character array, because, or in our string, and I'm going to go into that in a second. So let's actually create two variables that will represent that for us. So we're just going to have int index equals 0, and then we're going to have a field number equals 0 for now. And the field number is, I'm going to actually show you guys that right now, is going to identify which one of these values we're going to be looking at and storing. So let's see, this is going to be the second field number, and this is going to be the fourth field number. So let's say we were parsing the CSV file and we wanted to store that information into the first name. Well, we're gonna have to use a switch statement that has the field number to know that, okay, the information that we're gonna be storing is gonna be here in the first name. So let's go back to our read file. So it says one of the first things that we have to do is use a get line to grab in file, I believe, file, to grab the line that we're going to be reading in. So that's going to be data line, right? That's the variable we declared, and we're going to read that all the way up to the new line, which is from here all the way up to here. And we know there's a new line here because, you know, enter. There's an enter, so it goes to line 2, and then that reads in the line for us. The next thing we're gonna want to do is kind of have a loop that reads every single piece of data, and the way we can do that is do while get next field, because the get next field function is actually gonna help us get these fields right here that we're looking at. So let's go here. Let me close that. Get next field, and the parameters of get next field are a line, an index, and a substring. So the line is going to be the whole data line. The index is going to be just the regular index, and then the substring, we're actually going to want to create that. So we'll create that up here. String sub str. Fix this. Okay, cool. And then we're going to do this in a loop. So with this get next field, essentially how it's going to work is kind of like a substring function. And if you guys aren't too familiar with the substring function, it gets a string. So let's say we say the string is hello, my name is, right? That's our string. What the substring function does is that it grabs pieces of the string. So if we wanted to, we can grab this piece and it would just return hello for us, or it would, and we would store that into the substring. So I'm actually gonna show you guys how we can do that, because that's the next step that we're gonna have to want to do. So right here, get next field. They have pseudocode for get next field. So this function will receive a line of data from the file and starting at the index. Find the string, which is all the characters up to the next comma or new line. Fields are delimited by commas, and the string found not including the comma is saved in the substring. The commas that are separated should be skipped, and the value of the index should be updated as the line is passed. When the function returns, the index should point to the next character to be processed and will be used as a starting point for the next call to the function. .find may not be used. So here's some pseudocode that we have. So I'm actually gonna just go based off the pseudocode right now. So let me open this side by side. So it looks like in our getNext field, we need a string for the line, which is actually going to be this string right here, a string for the substring, which is this one right here, an index for the first character of the next field, which is this right here, and note that they're all passed by reference. So whatever we do in this function, whatever changes we make, are going to be kept after we exit the function. And it says, the first thing it says, while not at the end of the string and line is not equal to a comma. So while we're not at the end of the string, how do we know if we're at the end of the string? We can either compare it to size or we can compare it to a new line. So let's actually test the new line one because I usually do it, I usually compare it to size, but we'll say while line index is not equal to the new line, and actually no, this isn't gonna work, and I'll tell you guys why in a second. So while index is less than line dot size, and let's see what's wrong here. Okay, that should be okay. And then here it's gonna be while line index is not equal to the comma. Cool, so that works. And then all we want to do in here is substring plus equals line index. We're doing plus equals line index because line index is going to get a single character from the line that we're looking at, and plus equals is string concatenation. So let's say if we were adding my name and index was 0, it would add L to the substring, and then the next iteration it checks if index is less than size, index is not equal to the comma, and then it adds U to the substring, and so on until we get the whole name. And then once it's equal to the comma, then it'll stop this while loop and not add anything else, right? But in our case, we're actually going to do a semicolon because that's how this CSV file is delimited. But in your case, you're going to want to use a comma. So you always, when you're parsing things and parsing files, you want to look at how you can parse it or how things are delimited in the file. And then we can do index plus plus, right? And then our pseudocode wants us to increase the index one more time. And the reason we're doing this is because let's say right here, the index is going to compare if it's at the semicolon or comma or whatever, right? At that position in the string. And then it's going to be like, oh, we actually are at a comma, or oh, we actually are at a semicolon. And then it's going to leave the loop and not do anything. But when we loop again, when we call getNextField again, we don't want to be at that comma or semicolon position. So we actually want to move index up one so that we start at a character that's not a colon or a semicolon or a comma. And then if the line is less than or equal to the index, then we want to return false. And we want to return false because that means that we want to keep looping. We want to keep looping until the line length or the index is equal to the line length. And else we're going to return true because that means that we finished the whole parsing the whole line. And this should be enough to help us finish that. And the next thing that we have to do in the read file is actually save the index. So we have to save the field of the data that we just read into our temporary struct. So now we can actually just do this. Save field, and then the parameters is a field number, a substring, and the temporary structure. So we're going to pass in field number, comma sub str, which is the data we just parsed, and current person because that's the current person we're working on. And then we're going to want to increment the field number. Cool. So now what we can do is go into our field number. Actually, before we do this, before we actually do all this random stuff right here, let's see if we parse our data correctly. So we're just going to see out the substring and see if it works for a single line, because I'm only doing it for a single line right now. I'm not doing it for the whole loop or the whole all the pieces of data that we have to read in. And this is what you guys should do because you guys have a lot of data that you're going to be reading in. So we want to make sure we're storing that data correctly. So let's actually compile that real quick. Clear g++ main.cpp, and then it's people.csv. And as we can see here that it is parsing it correctly, but yeah, it is parsing it correctly, but the substring it keeps adding on, right? Because the substring is being passed by reference. Yeah, the substring is being passed by reference. So what we're gonna want to do after we parse it is probably clear the substring. So you can either set the substring to just quotations, which will clear it, or you can do .clear, which is a function that clears the strings for us. And we also notice that it's not giving us the very last piece of data that we need, which is the hair color. So what we want to do is we're actually going to see out that right here and see if it does in fact parse it for us, and if not, we'll look back at our function and see why it's doing that. So clear c++ main a.out people.csv. So cool. So now that we're clearing the substring, we're getting the pieces of information by themselves, and we're getting the last data. So the reason why it's not getting the last piece of data for us inside this loop is because if we look at the getNext field function, if the line.length is less than or equal to the index, it's going to return false. So we increment index here, so it's going to make this check first. And yeah, it's going to make this check first for us. And so in here, when we're actually reading it, that means this is going to be false, and it's no longer going to loop and save the field. So we're actually going to have to save the field one more time after the save field function, or after our little while loop that we have going on here. So let's uncomment this stuff. Wait, yeah, let's uncomment this stuff. So we know it's parsing correctly, and then after we save the field, we can clear the substring. And then we're probably going to want to save the field one more time after our loop. Cool. So let's get into the save field function. The save field function is pretty straightforward. All we're doing is having a switch statement determine where we're going to save the substring, because the computer doesn't know what information is in the substring, so we're going to have to tell it. So we're going to pass in the field number right here, and we're going to have different cases, which are these cases up here, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, because we know that case 0, if the field number is case 0, then it's going to be, we're storing the substring into the first name. If the field number is case 1, we're storing into the last name, etc. So if we go back down right here, we can do case 0. And then referring back to what I showed you guys earlier on how we store things into a structure, we use the member access operator, so the name of the variable, which is temp item in this case, dot member access operator, and then the case 0 is the first name. And then we're going to set that equal to the substring. And then I think it's a break after that, right? And we kind of repeat the same process for all our other cases. So let me... Cool. But case 1, this is going to be case 1, is not a first name. It's the last name. So we can just set that equal to the substring. Then we have case 2. Case 2 is actually an age. And what you guys are going to have is an error because right here, no suitable conversion from string to integer. That tells you exactly what's wrong. But I'm going to compile it just so you guys can see the error and kind of, so I can show you guys how to read it. Oh, wait, let me save it. Okay, cool. So let's actually clear this real quick. G++ main. Error cannot convert string to int. So it's going to point, it's going to tell me what line it's on. So it's line 111. Substring is a string, int age is an integer. So all we have to do is string to int. In your case, it's going to be string to double because you guys are working with doubles. So stowy is a function and substring is going to be the parameter to our function, and then the function will do its magic and give us a conversion. You guys actually have also a function somewhere, I believe, to convert for you guys. So string convert, in my case it would be double or int. So we can actually use this function right now and let's see what's wrong with this. Cannot overload functions distinguished by return type alone. Huh. That's weird. But let's actually do this sub. Okay, so I'm actually going to use this function just because you guys have to use it. So what I can do here is all it is, it's return string to int substring. And then I can just use string convert. And it works the same way. And then the last case is going to be the hair color. And we're going to set that equal to our string. So now that this while loop is going to save all the information for us, we are going to want to make sure that we have all that information. So first name, and then I'm going to do the current person, cout, last name. Oh, wait, hold up. So this is, if you guys can see this is an error. We can't see out a structure because a structure has a ton of different variables. So we have to kind of specify what variable we're going to want to look at, which in this case is going to be first. And then current person dot last. And we can repeat this for the other stuff, the other variables. So this is going to be age. This is going to be hair color. And this is going to be hair color. Cool. So now what we can do is see if our save field actually works, because current person is going to be passed by reference. So any changes that we make to our person object or person variable is going to actually make the change to this variable right here. So let's check and see if that works. So people.csv. And cool, right here we stored all the information. So Luis Diaz 20, hair color brown. So now what we can do is put this in a big while loop. So I'm going to do while I get the line and kind of just store all this stuff in here. Oh, hold up. Bam, cool. And records read, I'm pretty sure read file returns like some sort of count. Yeah, count right here. So what we can do is we want to increment after every line, so we can do count plus plus. And then I'll do it right here. So g++ main.cpp /a.out people.csv. And we can see here that it's just okay, we have like a little problem here. So let's actually see how we can fix this. So after we save the field number, oh. Yeah. So after we save the field number, we want to reset it back to 0 at the very top. Field number. Because if we keep incrementing field number over and over again here, for the next time we're trying to store a person, or the next time we're trying to store like information for a person, then field number is not going to be 0, so we won't know where to store it based on these cases. So it's going to go past 3, and that's an issue. So now we can clear that and g++ main people.csv, and I didn't save it. Okay, cool. So let's do this. People.csv, and it's still doing the same thing. So let's try and figure out why it's doing that. The first thing that we can do is maybe first name Brown. Okay. So we clear the substring. Dun, dun. So let's see. Let's look at. So the next person that we should be reading is John. So why doesn't it read John next? So get next field. We read the data line. We save the field. We clear the substring. So what we can do is let's actually comment this out and see out the field number right here. And then we're actually going to also want to see out the substring that we're storing. So we're storing and kind of see substring. So this will kind of help us identify what we're going to be storing. So let's clear this. g++ main ./a.out people.csv. So it looks like the field number. Okay. So the field number actually does change for the first case, but then the next loops that we're doing, field number isn't changing. So that means that there's a problem in our getNextField function. So we know that our save field function works, so we don't have to worry about this, and unless like something else comes up. So let's actually go back in here, and what we can do is see out the data line and make sure that we are grabbing every single line. So clear this. People.csv, cool. So we know we're grabbing every single line, so it has something to do with our get next field, right? And if you guys haven't realized or noticed by now, um, there's a perfect explanation to why this is happening. So if we go into our get next field, we're incrementing index, right? Every single time. And index is passed by reference. So index keeps track of where we are in these strings right here. If you guys can see that right here, it keeps track of where we are in these strings. So once we get to this value, index is probably like some number. So I don't even know what number it is. I think it might be like a 20 or I don't know, right? But we never reset index back to 0, like the same way we do for field number. And the reason we want to reset index back to 0 is because we want to tell the computer that, hey, we have to look at the beginning of the next line that we're reading, because we already finished the previous line. So after we set field number 0, we can just set index to 0 right here. And that should fix it for us. So let's go back, do clear, g++ main, a.out people.csv. And now that we can see, okay, so now after we save this field, we actually also want to clear the substring. So sub str.clear. Because we have, you know, the hair colors with connected to the first names, and we don't want that. So let's try that one more time. People.csv. Oh wait, I didn't save it. Oops. Okay. People.csv. And cool, we have all the people that we have. Luis Diaz, John Smith, Karen Walker, Tony DiGiorno, okay, Eliana Cortez, and so on. And we know that we have 5 records read. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Cool. So the last thing that we actually want to do is store it into our array or our vector, right? So as we discussed earlier, it's pretty simple to do. We have this vector called item. So we do item dot push back, and then we store that current person. And that's all you have to do. And then a way to check if you have like the right information in those in that vector, just do item and then you access the index. So like for example, item count is gonna be like for example, if we were to do like item 0 is gonna hold all the information for Luis Diaz because that's the first person we push in the vector. If we do item 1, that's gonna be all the information that we do for John Smith and so on. So we're actually just gonna do this. And then we can access the member variables the same way we do normally, because item count is going to give us a person structure, and then all we have to do to access like the age and numbers, use the member access operator. So control C. So I'm actually, for example purposes, I'm going to let this loop run by itself, and then underneath I'm going to do a for loop int I is equal to 0, I is less than item dot size, because I want to show you guys how to use the size function, and then I plus plus. So this is going to keep iterating for us the whole size of the vector, and we can just replace these counts with I. And then what it should do is print every single person and piece of information for us. Cool. So clear g++ main ./a.out people.csv. And if we look here, all the items are printed out because of the for loop. And so that means that we know we're storing the information correctly, and we know we're printing everything out correctly. And so with that being said, the next part of the assignment shouldn't be too hard because we already set up our database, so all we're doing is kind of manipulating and moving things around with our database. Um, so thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you found it helpful, please give it a like, a thumbs up, subscribe, do whatever. And yeah, I hope you guys have a good day. Peace.